Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're pulling off the main road into places you were never meant to stop. All across Texas, forgotten highways hide gas stations that come alive after dark, places where pumps turn on by themselves. Attendants don't have faces, and sometimes the road doesn't let you leave. These aren't stories for the faint of heart. These are 20 disturbing true encounters at Texas gas stations after dark, tales whispered by truckers, drifters, and those who barely made it back. But before we begin, here's something even creepier. Most viewers make one terrifying mistake. They watch without subscribing, and when they try to come back, well, let's just say some stories don't let go doubt, so hit that subscribe button now before your signal fades, before the lights flicker, and before something behind you starts to move. Tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments below, because the stations in these stories only open after midnight, and once you stop for gas, you may never leave. Let's dive in. You don't notice the smell right away. It creeps in like humidity low, sour, thick at the back of your throat. Not gasoline, not rubber, not oil. No, this is something older. Like meat left in a sunlit trunk, or something wet and living buried beneath the pump island concrete. But by the time you realize the stench has teeth, it's already too late. Daryl Whitaker pulled off U.S. Route 277 just a few minutes after midnight, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as his old Dodge Ram hissed up the last bend toward the lights. His GPS was out, the screen frozen, and his phone had stopped showing any signal about 20 miles, back somewhere near a sign so rusted he couldn't tell if it read "Welcome" or "Beware." He hadn't planned to stop. But the fuel light had flickered on just outside Bronte, and then, like always, it became a race between his own stubborn pride and that little orange bulb growing brighter with every mile. When he saw the old station squatting in the dark just off the junction, he exhaled and flicked the blinker like it meant anything out here. The station didn't have a name, no brand logo, just 4 ancient pumps under a cracked canopy, one flickering bulb swinging in the still air. The kind of place that looked closed even when a WSN single quotes T. Daryl rolled in slow. No other cars. The place looked abandoned, but the pumps were lit. One of them blinked an old green digital message, "Pay first inside." He turned off the engine and stepped out, boots crunching the gravel. That's when the smell hit. He paused. It was faint at first, but enough to wrinkle his nose. Not skunk, not roadkill. Just bad. A bad that didn't belong. Inside the glass booth, a register sat dark. A shelf of faded beef jerky bags lined the wall. A torn poster hung loose from the window that said, "Cold beer and ice." But no one stood behind the counter. No bell above the door. No sign of life. Daryl turned back toward the truck. That's when he saw him. The man, tall, thin, pale in a way that didn't reflect the lights so much as absorb them. He wore a dark blue jumpsuit that might have once said service across the back, but time and dirt had eaten the letters. His boots were black. His eyes weren't visible. In fact, his face wasn't clear at all. It shimmered, as if being remembered by someone who never got a good look. He stood behind the rear bumper of the truck, one hand resting on the pump handle. He didn't say a word, just inserted the nozzle and began to pump. Daryl opened his mouth to speak, to say, "Thanks," or "Didn't see you there," or some other dumb, nervous thing, but nothing came out. The stench poured from the pump. It rolled over him like smoke, only heavier. The kind of odor that made your eyes sting, your stomach not. Not just rot, but grief. Sadness clung to it. Like it wasn't just something dead, it was something forgotten and angry about it. The gas clicked off after 10 seconds. The man stood still. Daryl blinked. The man was gone. No footsteps. No sound. No goodbye. The pump handle rested in its cradle. The total read $6.66. Darrell stared at it, chuckled nervously. "Well, that's just peachy," he muttered, mostly to himself. He climbed back into the truck, slamming the door with more force than needed. The key shook in his hand, the engine turned over reluctantly, and the headlights flicked back to life. That's when he saw the man again, standing at the edge of the road, just past the signpost that didn't say anything at all. Hands at his side, watching. Still. Darrell peeled out faster than he meant to, the wheels kicking up dust and gravel. His heart pounded harder than he wanted to admit. He chalked it up to fatigue, highway hypnosis, or some backwoods hobo pulling a prank. But 30 miles later, he still couldn't shake the smell. It clung to the air vents. It clung to his shirt. It clung to the inside of his teeth, like plaque made of despair. He stopped at a diner in Arizona just before 2 a.m., figuring coffee would clear his head. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Clara, who looked like she'd been working that counter since the 70s, poured him a mug without asking. "Long night?" she asked. Darrell nodded. Stopped at a station off 227, weird place. Guy pumped gas without saying a word. Looked like a damn ghost. Clara froze. "Junction 227? She asked slowly. "Old station, canopy half broke, pump still working?" Darrell nodded again. "Jesus," she backed up. "That place burned down in 1994. My cousin worked there. Burned alive with the night shift attendant. They say he tried to fix the pump, but it ruptured. Caught fire before he could crawl out. His name was Earl. Quiet man. Didn't talk much." Darrell blinked. "The weird thing is," she continued, "folks still see someone there. Always late at night. Always pumping gas for free. Smells like death. Some people say he died so suddenly, his ghost doesn't know he's dead. Just keeps working that pump. Helping people who shouldn't be out that late." He didn't finish his coffee. He drove through the rest of the night with the windows down. The wind didn't wash the stink away. 3 days later, back in his own driveway, he opened the fuel door and found a smear of black handprint under the cap. No one had touched it since. That night, he heard a click outside. A gas pump nozzle. He looked out his window. The man was back, standing at the edge of the lawn, holding the hose. Waiting. The gas station sat just outside of Bronte, Texas, where US 277 runs like a spine of faded gray through the scrublands. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked. 2 rusting diesel bays, a tiny store with flickering fluorescent lights, and pumps that hadn't been upgraded since Clinton was in office. People called it Riggs Station, though nobody could tell you if there was ever a Riggs. The paint had peeled off the sign years ago, and the letters now just read IGGS Station, but they all remembered pump #3. It worked like the rest, mostly. The credit card swiper was busted and the keypad stuck, so folks had to go inside to pay cash, but it was never out of order. The hose hissed like any other, and it smelled of gasoline and hot metal. Still, locals crossed the lot to avoid it. They never looked at its screen, not even a passing glance. And if they absolutely had to use it, they stared at their shoes while it clicked off gallons. Travelers didn't know better. People like Evan, who pulled in one humid June night with a U-Haul trailer, a bad alternator, and nothing but his dog for company. He was headed west, chasing a job offer in El Paso that might not even be real. His life had collapsed behind him in bits and pieces, his lease, his girlfriend, his last paycheck. Now he was towing what was left of it across the Texas wastelands, hoping the next gas stop would get him through the next 100 miles. He was tired. He was half-starved. And when the last green bar on his dash faded, he pulled into the first patch of lights he saw, Riggs Station, unaware of the stories. He stepped out, stretched, then scratched the back of his neck. Bio, his old black lab, shifted in the passenger seat and whined, ears twitching. "Yeah, I know." "Just 5 minutes, boy," Evan muttered. He fished for his wallet and scanned the pumps. The two closest were taken, one by a dusty Silverado with no driver in sight, the other by a panel van with its hood up and wires hanging like entrails. That left pump number 3 standing by itself under a flickering light, screen dark. Nozzle waiting. He pulled up and got out. The pump beeped as he approached, the screen waking slowly green, then black, then green again. It blinked once, and Evan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the display. It wasn't like a mirror, not exactly. His image moved slower than he did, like a buffering video catching up. The face staring back was off. He looked pale, hollow-eyed, hair too flat, like a photo of himself taken without his permission. Evan squinted and tapped the glass. The image vanished, replaced with "See cashier," he chuckled. "Figures." The inside of the store smelled like bleach, overripe bananas, and something vaguely metallic. The man at the counter was bone-thin and stiff, with a plastic nametag that read, "Tom." He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just slid the drawer open and took Evan's 20, pushing a receipt across the counter like it was diseased. Evan gave him a polite nod and left. Back at pump number 3, he inserted the nozzle and started fueling. The click of the pump was loud in the night, echoed by the faint hum of insects battering the overhead bulb. Bio barked once inside the car, low and unsure. Evan turned his head. Behind him, nothing. But when he looked back at the pump screen, there it was again, his reflection. Only it wasn't quite him anymore. The background in the reflection was different. No car, no station lights. Just a field of tall grass swaying under a black sky. And standing behind his mirrored self, barely visible in the grainy dark, was a figure. Not moving. Not clear. Just standing. Evan blinked. Looked behind him. Still nothing. He laughed nervously. Gave the screen a tap. The image blinked out. He replaced the nozzle, heard the click, and climbed back into the driver's seat, suddenly eager to leave. As he started the engine, he looked once more at the pump screen. It was still on, still glowing faintly, but now it showed only grass. No field, no gas station. Just endless grass, moving like water in a breeze he couldn't feel. That night, he drove until the stars began to fade. Somewhere past Big Lake, he pulled into a rest stop and slept in the cab with Bo curled tight against the passenger seat. He dreamed of tall grass, of someone whispering behind him, of the pump screen pulsing like a heartbeat. When he woke, there was a smear on his rear window. Inside, a greasy handprint, child-size. He didn't stop again until El Paso. That should have been the end of it. But he started seeing things. In windows, in car mirrors, reflections that lagged a second behind his movements. Sometimes they didn't move at all. One night, weeks later, he was brushing his teeth in a motel in Isleta when he saw her. In the mirror. Behind him, a woman. Hair matted to her face. Skin the color of mold, smiling. He turned, but the bathroom was empty. Bo was outside the door, whimpering. He smashed the mirror with the heel of his boot and left town by morning. In a diner west of Las Cruces. He met a woman named Kara. She was filling coffee, chatting with truckers. Her eyes were sunken and her hands trembled. When he asked if she was okay, she looked at him for a long time and said, "You been to Riggs?" He froze. "How did you?" "Pump number 3, she whispered. "Don't ever look at the screen. That's how it starts." She told him stories. About a soldier on leave who pumped gas there and never made it home. About a woman who drove in with a flat tire and was found days later, her body twisted in the back seat, staring at her own broken phone screen. About a boy who took a selfie with pump number 3 behind him. His parents swore there was someone else in the photo. Someone with no face. Evan listened and his coffee went cold. Kara leaned close and said, "If you ever see something behind you in a reflection, don't turn around." That night, he broke every mirror in his apartment, covered the TV, turned off his phone. But it didn't stop Dot because reflections aren't always about you. Sometimes they're a doorway. Sometimes they're a window. And sometimes they show what's coming. A week later, B.O. vanished. Just gone. The back door open. No signs of a struggle. Just a wet smear of something foul on the linoleum. Evan barely slept after that, Dot, and then, finally, the screen came back. He found it in the oven glass. In the darkness of his unplugged microwave. His own face staring back too still, too wide-eyed. And behind him, the woman from the mirror. Standing closer now, he ran, tried to outrun it. Checked into a motel in Amarillo. Locked every door. Sat in the middle of the room with no screens, no lights. But even in the dark, the air shifted, and from behind him came the quiet click-click of a gas pump. Dot, he turned. The last thing he saw was her smile. Dot, in the end, they found his body twisted against the dresser, eyes open, mouth gaping. No sign of a break-in. Just one thing out of place. The TV, smashed from the inside. And on the screen, though the plug was pulled, was the image of pump #3. Still running, still waiting, still showing what's behind you. The pumps at Barstow Stop and Go hadn't worked right in years. Folks from town said they sputtered too much, charged wrong amounts, smelled like something dead had crawled into the underground tanks and stayed there. Most locals avoided it altogether. Driving the extra 10 miles to the Chevron on 287, but that didn't stop travelers. People cutting through West Texas in the dark, chasing lost time or something they thought they'd left behind. They'd roll into Barstow because it was the only light for miles. A flickering blue sign and a glowing open on the grimy glass door that never seemed to lock. Greg hadn't planned to stop there either, but when his rental Jeep started, sputtering near the county line and the low fuel light screened orange, he took the next exit that even hinted at civilization. A woman's voice on the GPS had said, "Next service station, 1.2 miles. What she hadn't said was that the station looked like it had been built in the 70s and abandoned in the 90s until someone decided to drag it back from the grave with duct tape and spite. The pumps looked like rusted robots, long-armed and slouched. One of them had a plastic bag duct taped over the handle, like a broken limb. But pump number 2 blinked green. Greg pulled up and killed the engine, stepping out into the windless heat. It was too quiet. No cicadas. No trucks on the nearby road. Just the creak of a nearby sign and the occasional snap of moths frying themselves in the overhead light. He reached for the handle, but before he touched it, a voice crackled through the overhead intercom, tinny, unnaturally loud. "Go ahead and pump. You're good." Greg jumped. The voice had come from nowhere, maybe everywhere, soaked into the shadows like radio static. He looked up at the light fixture, then toward the dark windows of the station. The inside was a yellowed haze. He thought he saw movement something. Behind the counter. A man, maybe? Hard to tell. Greg hesitated, then slid his card through the reader. The machine beeped twice. Then nothing. No receipt. No green light. Just silence. "I said you're good," the voice repeated, this time softer, like it was right behind his ear. He turned quickly. Nothing but his own shadow. He picked up the nozzle and shoved it into the tank, his hands trembling for no reason. He could explain. The pump jerked to life with a cough, then a low mechanical whine as gas began to flow. Inside the car, his phone buzzed with a text, but when he checked it, the screen had gone black. Wouldn't turn back on. Not even a flicker. That's when he looked up. Through the grime-smeared glass of the convenience store, someone was definitely behind the counter now. Tall, unmoving. Pale shirt, pale face, or what should have been a face. Greg squinted. The head turned slightly as if it saw him. But there were no features. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just smooth, seamless skin like stretched wax. The figure raised a hand long fingered, yellowed like bone beneath skin, and waved. Greg staggered backward, nearly yanking the nozzle out of the tank. The pump clicked off. "Come on in," said the intercom, softer now. "Snacks. Cold drinks. You look tired." He opened the car door, slid in, and locked it. But the Jeep wouldn't start. The key turned no ignition. No click. Just a hollow metallic thunk. Then he saw the figure again. Not inside. Outside now, standing near the glass doors, hands still raised in that slow wave. Up close, the thing looked worse taller than a man, too thin, like it had been stretched. Its skin pulsed faintly, and Greg realized it was breathing. But not through lungs. The skin itself pulsed in and out, like some massive pore was sucking air. The door opened. Not fast, just a hiss in the swing. The lights inside flickered. The security camera above the door sparked and died. Greg gripped the steering wheel, forcing his brain to work through the panic. He popped the hood. Maybe the battery. Maybe a hand slapped against his window. It was the thing. Right there. No face, just that blank, flesh-like dome pressing against the glass. And from somewhere now, not from the intercom, but from inside the Jeep came the voice again. "Calm. Male. Too calm. Gas is on the house." Greg screamed and slammed his foot on the brake, shifting gears, wrenching the wheel. The car wouldn't. Moved out the hand on the window, began to peel back, not away. The skin split down the palm like wet paper. Inside, instead of flesh and muscle, there were shapes, faces, pressed into the tissue like clay molds. One looked like a man terrified. Another, a child, mouth frozen in a scream. The hand slid down the window, leaving a wet, clear smear. Greg scrambled for the passenger side, shoving the door open. He stumbled out into the dirt, tripping on loose gravel and crawling backward. The Jeep lights flicked on. The thing was in the driver's seat. No. Door had opened. It just was. It sat still for a moment, hands on the wheel. Then it turned toward him, and for the first time, the skin on its face rippled. A mouth opened, or something that looked like one, and from it came the sound of his mother's voice, saying, "Why don't you ever call me, baby?" Greg screamed. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. That voice had been on his voicemail last week. She'd been dead for 2 years. He ran. Toward the road, toward nothing, toward whatever might come next. He didn't look back, not even when tires crunched. Behind him, not even when headlights flooded the highway, not even when the voice said, "Greg, come back. You forgot your receipt." They found his Jeep a few days later, still idling at pump number 2. Keys in the ignition. Driver's seat damp and warm, like someone had just gotten out. No sign of Greg. Except for the receipt, folded neatly on the dash. With a message typed across the bottom. "See you next time." The gas station sat hunched like a forgotten animal at the edge of I-35, just north of Cula. Past midnight, nothing but a flickering neon open sign kept it tethered to the world. One of those old family-owned places with one gas pump, a rust-bitten awning, and a red soda cooler along the back wall of the store that looked like it hadn't been serviced since Reagan was president. Crickets shrieked in the dark, and the air had that sweaty thickness only a South Texas summer could summon. You could feel the land breathing. Darryl wasn't supposed to be driving this late. He was on the road back from Laredo, late freight job, picking up a part for a friend's transmission shop in Waco. Should have stayed overnight like Hank told him, but something gnawed at his gut all day. A tightness. Like he was running from something but couldn't name it. Sleep wouldn't come easy either way, so he drove. Window down, music low, the moon glaring at him through the bug-smeared windshield. He didn't realize how parched he was until the exit sign blinked past and the little station loomed out of the dark like a haunted memory. He almost didn't stop. But the throat was dry, and the Coke in the back of his mind fizzed with memory. Ice cold, glass bottle, just like his dad used to buy him after fishing trips. When things were simpler. When there were still shadows in the corners, but they hadn't yet started whispering. The bell above the door didn't ring when he walked in. Just that odd kind of silence you get in places that have been left alone too long. The clerk, some kid with acne scars and drooping eyes, didn't even look up from behind the dusty counter. There was a small black and white TV next to the register, playing static. "Cooler's working," the boy said without looking. "If you want soda." His voice was thin, dry, like his tongue was cracked open in places. "And his eyes never moved." Darryl nodded, made his way down the aisle, dust kicking up under his boots. Rows of old candy bars and outdated jerky glared back at him. The overhead lights buzzed like angry hornets, some flickering like they were choking on something invisible. And there it was. The soda cooler, red paint peeling at the edges, the logo on the door warped like it had melted slightly under the sun. But it hummed with power. A low, steady thrum that vibrated in Darryl's teeth the closer he got. He reached for the handle. The moment his hand touched it, the cooler door exhaled. Not a blast of cold air. Something warmer, wetter, like the breath of something that had been hiding behind the door a long, long time. And with that breath came a sound, soft, too soft. It whispered, "Darryl." His body locked. It didn't echo like sound. It was inside him, slithering through his ears and into his mind like oil. It wasn't a hallucination. It was his name, whispered in the exact voice of someone he hadn't heard in 15 years. "Darryl," it said again. Female this time. His mother. No. That wasn't possible. He opened the door. Rows of sodas stood there. Normal. Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, all with slightly faded labels. The air was cold now, real cold. Mist curled out from the cooler like smoke. For a moment, it seemed normal. His fingers touched the glass of a Coke bottle. And the cooler whispered again, louder now, "You forgot us." The bottle shifted, only slightly, but they did. A whole row of Cokes leaned inward, clinking glass like teeth tapping. His hand jerked back. Behind the bottles, where there should have been a wall, was a gap. A crack in the back panel about the width of 2 fingers. It hadn't been there when he first opened the door. Through that crack, something moved. Eyes. Not human. They blinked sideways, not up and down. Then they vanished. Darryl slammed the cooler shut. He stood there, breathing hard, hands shaking. The kid behind the counter hadn't moved. The static on the TV had shifted patterns. Now shapes. For a moment, he thought he saw a face, open-mouthed, screaming silently. He shook himself, walked toward the register, Coke bottle in hand. His fingers had frostbite numbness. "You got a back room behind the cooler?" he asked. The kid didn't answer. Darryl leaned in. "I asked you a question." The kid finally looked up. His eyes were solid black, not dilated. Not shadowed. Just black. Pupil to sclera. "The cooler knows," the boy said. His lips cracked as he smiled, skin splitting at the corners. "It remembers everyone who forgets." Darryl dropped the bottle. It hit the counter but didn't shatter. Instead, it stuck. Just stuck, like it had sunk into the wood. Halfway down, he backed away, heart hammering, the hum of the cooler behind him rising in pitch. It wasn't humming anymore. It was breathing, and then it laughed. Not loud, not fast. A slow, gurgling laugh, like someone gargling blood. It came from behind the door again. He ran. Shoulder hit the exit. The bell still didn't ring. The door took too long to open, like something on the other side was pulling back, and when he finally got through it, the parking lot was dark. No lights. No bugs. No sound. His truck was gone. Only tire marks remained. Darryl stood in the stillness, staring at the spot where his headlights should have been. Something moved in the window behind him. He turned back. The soda cooler door was wide open. A face was pressed to the gap in the back. His mother's. Her skin was gray and wet like it had been soaking in cold brine. Her lips were split, but her eyes were full of desperate knowing. "You left me," she said. He screamed, but no sound came. The last thing he saw before he turned and ran was the cooler's inside dot. It had no back dot, no wall dot, only dark. A tunnel of cold flesh that pulsed and shivered, full of thousands of bottles whispering names. One of them was his. He ran into the woods, not knowing which way the road had gone. He never found it again. The station never showed up on any map dot, and if you stop for a Coke at a lonely store off I-35, and the cooler door whispers your name, don't open it dot. It only ever calls who it remembers, and it remembers everyone. Katarina was the kind of town you didn't plan to pass through. It sat quietly off State Highway 83 like a memory someone had tried to forget but couldn't quite erase. Dust collected in layers on the gas pumps, and tumbleweeds were the only regular customers. The old service station just before the town limit had collapsed years ago, a blackened skeleton of stone and iron that no one bothered to tear down. Most locals wouldn't look at it, not even in daylight. The news station, if you could call it that, was a prefab trailer with a single pump out front, and it closed well before dark. They said the woman came after midnight. It started like a whisper in the mid-90s. A trucker out of Laredo claimed he saw her, an old woman, barefoot, with skin like flaking parchment, walking along the shoulder near the ruins. She asked him for matches. When he fumbled to hand her his lighter, she just smiled, shook her head, and walked back toward the burned-out frame of the old station. He drove off, freaked out, never came back. But the stories piled up. Teenagers daring each other to stop. On the roadside near Katarina said she'd tap on the window, eyes too shiny, voice rasping like fire had scorched her throat. Always the same words. "Do you have a light?" Frankie Delgado hadn't believed in any of that shit. Born and raised in Uvalde, he'd heard ghost stories all his life. His dad used to tell them at barbecues. Haunted mines, phantom dogs, things in the brush with red eyes and sharp teeth. Frankie used to laugh, especially after his third beer. But then his father died in a grain silo accident and the laughter dried up. Ghosts weren't so funny when death had your last name. Frankie took a job running late night fuel deliveries along the border counties. Gasoline, propane, diesel, he moved it all. The pay was decent, and the hours meant fewer people, which suited him. On a fog-heavy night in July, he pulled into Katarina just past 1 a.m., running low on caffeine and patience. The radio had gone to static. His GPS kept spinning in circles, stuck on a blank green screen like the signal just gave up on this part of the map dot. Then he saw her. She was standing beside the ruins of the old station, barely visible in the glow of his high beams. Thin, motionless. A pale figure in a dress that looked stitched from smoke and dirt. She raised her hand. Frankie slowed, half out of curiosity, half out of something older, something deeper that tugged at him with invisible fingers. He rolled the window down. A few inches. The air smelled like oil and cinders. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. She turned slowly. Her face looked like candle wax melted and hardened again, mouth fixed in a brittle, cracked smile. I just need a match, she rasped. Just one, please. Frankie reached toward his glove box. He didn't know why. He didn't smoke. He never carried matches. But still, he opened it. Inside were 3 books of matches. That stopped him cold. He hadn't seen one of those since high school. He picked one up. It was old, stiff, with faded lettering across the front. Delgado Service, Katarina, TX, open 24/7. That was his family name. His father's last name, and his father never owned a gas station. His hands trembled as he looked. Back up, but she was already at his door, palm pressed against the glass, eyes wide and unblinking. Light it for me, she said. Too close? Now. Her breath fogged the window, and behind it, he thought he saw flame flickering inside her pupils. Small fires, trapped. Frankie slammed the truck into reverse and floored it. The tires screamed. He didn't stop until he was halfway to Carrizo Springs, shaking so hard he almost ran off the road. He told no one. Not at first, but the matchbook stayed with him. Everywhere he went. Locked in the glove box, stuffed in the ashtray, tossed. In the trash, it reappeared. On the dashboard. On the seat beside him. On his lap when he woke up from a roadside nap. One night, he got drunk and tried to burn it. It wouldn't catch. The match heads crumbled, but no flame came. Just that same black smoke and the faint smell of charred cedar. By September, he'd started hearing the voice, not in the wind, not in dreams, but right in his ear. While driving, while shaving, while pissing at a rest stop. Just one match, please. He began to dig. Archives, town records. The internet was no help. Katarina barely existed on Google. But a librarian in Eagle Pass found something for him. Newspaper clipping from 1961. Tragedy in Katarina, station fire claims elderly woman. It described a freak explosion at Delgado Service Station. A gas leak, investigators believed. The blaze consumed the entire building. The body of a woman, never named, had been found near the back office, clutching a charred matchbook in one hand. She'd lived in a trailer out back, sweeping the station, stocking shelves. No family, no ID, no obituary. Frankie remembered something else now, a story his father once told when Frankie was 10. A fire killed my uncle, his dad had said. Staring into the flames of a campfire. Gas station accident. Whole thing lit up like hell. Came to Texas. He left a woman behind. She wasn't quite right. She used to talk to the walls. She'd say they whispered to her at night. Never got out, they said. Frankie had laughed at the time. He wasn't laughing anymore. In October, he returned to Catarina. He didn't want to. But something called to him, deep and low, like pressure behind the eyes. He parked near the ruins, engine running. The moon cast bones of shadow across the broken beams. He didn't see her this time. He heard her, footsteps on crushed gravel, a sigh too close, a dry hiss like a match being struck again and again. Then came the whisper, Frankie. Help me. He turned. No one. The matchbook was already open on his dashboard. One match left. Just one. He picked it up. The head was red. The sulfur smelled. Sweet. He struck it. For a second. Nothing happened. Then the flame flared. Bright. Hot. Brighter than it should have been. It didn't burn the matchstick. It burned upward into his hand, along his arm, his chest. He screamed and dropped it, but the fire stayed, licking down the seatbelt into the console, into the steering wheel. He kicked open the door and rolled onto the pavement. But the truck didn't burn. There was no fire. Just cold sweat, shaking limbs, and the matchbook back in his hand, still unopened. Back in Uvalde, he quit his job. Took up drinking again. Stopped sleeping. The voice came every night. Please, just one light. It's been so long. The doctors called it a nervous breakdown. Prescribed pills. Frankie stopped taking them after the pills started looking like matchsticks. On the last night anyone saw him, he'd gone back to Catarina. The sheriff found his rig parked at the edge of the ruins. Empty. No signs of struggle. Just the smell of smoke, faint and lingering, like an old campfire long since dead. In the passenger seat sat a single book of matches. They buried an empty casket. And sometimes, not always, not if you're lucky, if you drive through Katarina, past midnight and stop near the crumbling station, you'll see her. An old woman, hair in ash-colored tangles, dress scorched at the hem. She'll knock on your window, tap, 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 and ask, as politely as a ghost can, for a light. Be careful. If you say no, she disappears. If you say yes, well, you might never leave the flame behind. They still talk about the gas station off Route 329 just outside Crane, Texas. Nothing left now but sun-baked concrete slabs and a leaning pole sign missing all but one cracked letter, a jagged E that swings and clinks in the wind like a loose tooth. The building's gone. Burned down sometime in the late 90s. Arson, maybe. Maybe something else. But the freezer's still there. That big old commercial icebox that once sat out front, a rusted steel coffin now swallowed by Johnson grass, and mesquite thorns. Folks drive by it without seeing it, their eyes sliding off it like it's not supposed to be noticed. But the kids, they see it. They talk about it. They dare each other to touch the handle, to open it. Nobody talks about who was first to disappear. Maybe it was Roy Tucker's little girl, the one with the cleft palate and the crooked walk. Maybe it was Dylan Pierce, who was always running off on his bike and turning up with dead squirrels in his backpack. Or maybe nobody was first because he was always there waiting, frozen and quiet, breathing softly against the frost-rimed metal. Walls from the inside, the story never changes much. Ask a kid in Crane, they'll tell you. You open the door, and for the first second, it's just an empty freezer. Maybe some old beer cans in the corner. Maybe a trail of melted ice that somehow hasn't dried despite the summer heat. But then, you hear it breathing, soft, hoarse, wet, like lungs half full of water. Then you feel the cold, not freezer cold. Not the kind you can explain. It's a cold that wraps around your spine like hands made of ice water and nails. A cold that hums. A cold that waits. They say his face is pressed against the back wall, eyes open, glazed in hoarfrost, lips slightly parted like he was caught mid-sentence. They say he doesn't blink, but he does breathe. You can see the frost on his lips, the tiny bursts of vapor like smoke signals spelling your name. Most kids bolt, that's what they say. Run before the door slams shut, before he moves. But some don't run fast enough. See, the freezer door has that latch, the kind that clicks when it shuts. That's how they made him back then. No interior release. Safety wasn't a thing folks thought much about. And once it shuts, it stays shut. The Murphy boy, Ricky, he came back babbling. Summer of 2013. Went missing for almost 8 hours. Found him curled up under a trailer out by the pecan grove, eyes wide, pants soaked, fingernails torn bloody. Wouldn't speak for weeks. When he finally did, all he said was, he smiled. He smiled when the light went out. That's when the Pierce boy's dad took a sledgehammer to the freezer. Broke the handle clean off, dented the door in 3 places. Thing still opens, still works. No power, no compressor, no nothing. But inside, always cold. Back in the 70s, the story went around that the original station owner, Hallie Sneed, locked himself in there. Left a note about voices under the ice and dreams too loud to sleep, but Hallie was never found. Neither was his wife or their son. The sheriff at the time called it a domestic dispute and a runaway. People in town didn't argue. They just stopped buying gas there. The station changed hands a few times, then shut down for good in '92, but the freezer stayed. Every few years, someone goes missing. Not always kids. A vagrant, a drifter, a methead crawling through the brush. The cops don't connect it because there's nothing left to connect, but the locals know. You don't go near the freezer. You don't touch the door. Not unless you want to see him. Some say he's not a ghost. Not exactly. Not a person either. That what's inside that box is a placeholder, a shape, something left behind or let in, something that once wore skin, but doesn't need it anymore. It keeps the form to fool you, lures you close enough to open the door. Billy Ray Mercer made that mistake just a few months ago. 19 years old, working part-time at the feed store, cocky as hell. Took the dare from a group of 8th graders who bet him $20 he wouldn't climb inside. He did it. Crawled in, laughed his ass off, called them chicken. Told them to close the door, count to 30, then let him out. They did. When they opened it, the freezer was empty. Billy Ray wasn't there. No footprints in the frost. No sound, just cold. Cold so deep one of the kids got frostbite on his hand just reaching in. Cops searched for weeks. Drones, dogs, helicopters. Nothing. His mama lit candles in the church every night until she died of a stroke in April. At the funeral, her sister said she dreamed of Billy Ray's voice coming from somewhere deep. So cold, Aunt Jeannie. So cold I can't blink. Every year, around the hottest part of June, the frost on that old freezer gets thicker. You can see it even from the road-like white mold growing around the door seams. You can hear the creak of the hinges at night, though no one ever sees the door open. And that breathing, that low, damp rasp, it rolls through the brush like wind. But there's no wind, just heat and dry silence. The town doesn't talk about it out loud anymore. Parents move away. The school shrinks year by year. Gas stations gone, but folks still drive out on dares, on drunk nights, on bored Friday. Evenings with too much whiskey and not enough sense. But they don't always come back. Someone painted a warning on the door last year, "Don't open." The paint's flaked now. Looks more like an invitation. And deep inside, past the threshold where light seems to bend and silence thickens, he waits. Always cold. Always breathing. Always smiling in the dark. Behind a curtain of frost that smells faintly of rot and gasoline. And if you lean in real close, you'll hear it. The whisper. Not from him. From the others. The ones he's keeping cold. The ones still breathing. They appeared sometime after 2 in the morning, just as I was nodding off at the wheel. I'd been driving from Odessa to Del Rio, pushing it through the empty West Texas night, chewing sunflower seeds and gulping lukewarm gas station coffee. To stay awake. The dashboard clock glowed 2:11 a.m. when the engine light blinked on, and the truck gave a stuttering cough like it was clearing its throat for the last time. I coasted off the highway and into a small pull-off area by an old, half-lit gas station with one working pump and a flickering, fluorescent overhang that buzzed like it was full of angry hornets. The sign on the station read, "Ernies Fuel," and "Feed," though there were no lights on inside, just shelves barely visible through the dusty glass. Looked like it hadn't seen business since the 90s, but the pump worked. At least it lit up when I jammed in my credit card. I slid out of the cab of my truck, stretched, and felt the air, thick and still, not quite hot, but not cool either, like something stale being breathed out of the ground. That's when I heard it. Children's laughter. Light, breathy, and distant at first. I figured maybe a TV was left on inside the station, but it grew louder, closer, circling. I turned, expecting to see a family pulled in, maybe a couple of kids running around. But there was no one. Just my truck, the pump, the empty road, and a spindly mesquite tree by the edge of the lot. Then the pump clicked and stopped at $23. I moved to hang it up and froze. There were handprints on the driver's side window. Small smudged ones, as if kids had been pressing their hands and faces to the glass, trying to peek inside. I stared at them for a long moment. The prints were black, as if the kids had been handling charcoal. Thick streaks trailed down from the fingers like soot caught in morning dew. I walked around the truck, checking the lot. No giggling now, no sound at all. Even the buzzing lights seemed to quiet down. I pressed my hand against one of the prints. The glass was cold, but the soot was still damp, like it had just been made. I didn't hear them walk up. The first kid. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, skin gray with ash, barefoot and grinning, stood by the tailgate. His eyes were too wide, too still. A little girl stepped beside him, clutching what looked like a doll burned halfway down, its hair melted to the scalp. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then more came. 4, 5, 7 of them stepping slowly out from behind the building. And the shadows. All filthy, barefoot, clothes torn, hair matted and scorched. One held a plastic fireman's helmet, the edges warped like it had been in an oven. Another dragged a rusted red tricycle missing one wheel. They circled the truck silently, eyes gleaming like embers. I backed up until I felt the pump behind me. "What do you want?" I said. The boy nearest to me tilted his head. He blinked, slow, like a lizard. Then, finally, he spoke, not out. Loud, but in my head, like his voice bypassed my ears and tunneled straight into my thoughts. "You saw us," he said. "No one ever sees us." I shook my head, heart pounding. This isn't real." They laughed all at once. The sound bounced off the metal awning and echoed in the dark. The girl stepped forward and pointed at the windshield. "You drive real slow tomorrow," she said, whispering with a rasp like torn paper. "He's not done with you yet." I didn't ask who she meant. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and gunned the ignition. It hesitated, then roared to life. The kids didn't flinch, just stood there, grinning, watching me with blackened hands and hollow eyes. I tore out of the lot and didn't look back. The next morning, I pulled into a diner outside Brackettville, shaking and white-knuckled. The waitress poured me a coffee and stared at me like I just crawled out of a ditch. "You all right, hon?" I saw some kids," I said. "Back at a gas station on 277, covered in soot. Left handprints on my window." She paused. Her smile faded. "You mean Ernies?" "Yeah, that was the name on the sign." She didn't answer for a moment. Then she sighed. "Ernies burned down in '92. Some kids playing with matches in the feed storage. Whole place went up like a candle. 7 of them died. Fire chief never figured how they got locked in." I didn't respond. "Folks say you can still hear 'em out there," she went on, quieter now. "Mostly truckers see 'em. Laughing, pointing, like they're playing, but they never leave prints." She leaned closer. "Not unless they pick someone." My truck was parked just outside, sunlight bouncing off the windshield. I excused myself and walked out. The windows still bore the prints, streaks of black soot in the shape of small hands, faded slightly, but still there. When I wiped at them, they didn't smear. They stayed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw those kids, laughing, pointing, pressed against the glass. I tried cleaning the truck, washing the windows with every solvent I could buy, but the marks remained like they were etched into the glass. And then, 3 nights later, I woke to find them standing outside the motel window. Same kids, same smiles. And this time, they brought someone with them. He stood behind them, taller, darker. His eyes weren't eyes at all, just pits burning red at the edges. He wore an old fire coat, melted and black, and he didn't speak. He only pointed at me through the glass, and when I turned to run, I found soot on my bed sheets, smeared like handprints had tried to pull me out of sleep. They came again. Every night after. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't leave the lights off. I sold the truck, but the guy who bought it returned it a week later, left it in my driveway with the doors open and the windows shattered. Didn't even ask for his money back. Just walked away crying and never came back for it. The prints were still there. I tried leaving Texas, drove north as far as Kansas, but I started seeing other things. Charred toys left on my doorstep, smoke in the mirror, small handprints. On the inside of my shower curtain, they're with me now, wherever I go, laughing in the vents, waiting in the mirrors, and I think the man in the coat is getting closer. Last night, I found a matchbook on my pillow. The front read, Ernies Fuel, and feed Dot, and on the inside cover, written in ash, play with us. The road between Bastrop and McDade was a black ribbon through nowhere, lined with trees that leaned too close, too silent. You'd drive it and feel like you were underwater, like headlights barely pushed the dark aside, like the tires weren't quite touching earth. Truckers called it Dead Stretch. Old-timers called it the Devil's Run. Most folks with any sense didn't drive it after dark, but Mark Dawson didn't have much sense left. He hadn't eaten in 17 hours, hadn't slept in 30, and was coming off a 2-day run to El Paso with a cab full of expired snack cakes and melted protein bars. His rig was low on fuel and lower on patience. When the gauge dipped into the red, the warning light flickering like a slow heartbeat, Mark cursed under his breath and prayed for a station. That's when he saw it, a glow in the trees, bright white, floodlights spilling over the canopy like moonlight on fire. A sign loomed out of the dark. Easy fuel stop, open 24 hours. He almost missed the turn, gravel grinding under his wheels as he jerked the wheel. The truck fishtailed, corrected, then pulled into the lot. There was no storefront. Just a concrete island with 2 pumps, a pay booth, and a flickering icebox that read, Coldest beer in Texas. The asphalt was cracked and bubbling with weeds, and the yellow parking lines had faded into ghost streaks, but the lights were on. The pumps were humming, and when Mark rolled down his window, he heard something playing softly through the air, a faint tune, static-laced, something old and country. Waylon Jennings or Hank Williams, maybe. He pulled alongside pump 1. The screen flickered to life with a static buzz. No voice. No beeps, just green text. Insert card. Mark hesitated. The station looked wrong, not just old. Wrong in a way that crawled into your stomach and settled there like bad meat. But he needed fuel. He slid his company card in. The screen blinked again. Lift nozzle. Begin fueling. So he did. As gas poured into the tank, Mark stepped out, stretching his legs, lighting a cigarette. He glanced around. No other cars. No booth attendant. Nothing behind the icebox except brush and fence line. The booth's windows were dark, coated with grime thick as paint. The whole place smelled faintly of warm diesel and something else like moldy bread or wet carpet left out in the sun. And then he noticed the clock above the booth. It read 12:01 a.m. But it wasn't ticking. Just stuck. A minute passed. Another. Still 12:01. The nozzle clicked. Full tank. Mark returned it to the cradle. The screen flashed. Thank you. Come again. And just below that, for the briefest moment, something else blinked into view. Run. He stared at it. Blinked. But it was gone. He laughed, but it wasn't a clean laugh. It came up from somewhere in his throat, hollow and too sharp. He rubbed the back of his neck and started to climb back into the cab. And then he saw them. 3 people. Standing by the trees. No movement. No sound. Just silhouettes, man, woman, child. All backlit by the station's harsh lights. Like cardboard cutouts. Like they'd been painted into the scene by someone who didn't quite understand how humans stood. Mark squinted. "You folks all right?" No answer. He looked away. Looked back. They were gone. The same moment, the station's music cut out. Silence. No humming from the lights. No static. Even the bugs were quiet. The only sound left was the soft tick-tick of his cooling engine. Mark climbed into the truck, closed the door too hard, locked it. His pulse was pounding. He told himself it was just the road, just exhaustion. He cranked the engine. The headlights swept across the lot and caught the booth. Someone was inside it now. The booth that had been empty and black for the last 5 minutes now had a figure hunched inside, motionless. All Mark could see was the top of a balding head and a shoulder draped in something gray. The face was turned down, like the man was reading something or maybe praying. Mark honked. No reaction. He honked again. Still nothing. Then the head twitched. Not lifted, twitched. Like a glitch in a video game. A stuttering movement that jerked once, paused, then turned all at once to face him. The lights in the booth flared for a second. Mark saw the eyes. Too wide. Too pale. Like milk over glass. And the mouth. The mouth was open. Far too open. No lips. Just a gaping oval of black, as though someone had taken a melon baller to the lower half of his face. And something in that black was moving. Mark peeled out. The tires screamed. He bounced the truck back onto the highway with barely a look, roaring east like the devil was dancing in his mirrors. He didn't stop until he hit McDade, found a diner with a parking lot full of cars and light that looked warm and real. The waitress poured him coffee and said he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He told her what he saw, and she went still. Then she asked, "Was it the Easy Fuel stop?" "Yeah," she shook her head. "Honey, that place burned down in 1987. Took the night clerk, his wife, and their little girl. Guy went crazy, they said. Lit the tanks with a match. Boom." Mark didn't answer. Didn't sleep that night either. But 3 nights later, curiosity got the better of him. He went back. Told himself it had just been a dream, just road fatigue and imagination. But the second his wheels touched that gravel lot, he knew he was wrong, because the pumps were working, the lights were on, and the booth? The booth was empty again, but only for now. He didn't even get out. He just sat there, watching the digital. Clock above the booth tick from 11:59 to 12 o'clock, then to 12:01 and stop. And that's when the radio came on by itself, and Waylon Jennings started singing from the grave. Now, some nights, folks still report fueling there, around midnight. No clerk, no receipt, no problem. Card always works. Gas always flows. But those same folks, a few don't make it home. And the ones who do, they never drive that stretch again, because deep down, they remember. The pumps work. The lights buzz. But the place hasn't had an employee in 40 years. It was one of those summer nights in Lott, Texas, where the air stuck to your skin like a wet sheet. Heavy with heat, thick with the smell of asphalt and diesel from the trucks still rolling down Highway 77. The kind of night where the bugs scream. Loud enough to make your ears ring, and you swear you can hear things moving in the shadows, even if you know better. Or maybe you don't. Bradley Minter didn't know much anymore. He'd driven down from Waco after quitting time, too rattled to sit still in his cramped apartment. He didn't want to go home, didn't want to face his ex's texts again, didn't want to drink another beer alone. So he drove. One of those. Drives with no purpose but the motion, the rumble of tires, the shallow comfort of watching exit signs drift past. He'd never been to Lot, though he'd heard of it. A speck on the map, barely worth the green sign that marked the town limits. But he needed gas, and the red warning light on his dashboard had been glowing since Marlin. That's when he saw it, an old station on the edge of town. One of those sad, flickering places that looked like it belonged in another decade. No big franchise sign, no LED price display. Just a low canopy, 2 pumps, and a little squat building behind them with a glowing open sign in the window. Though it was past midnight, Brad pulled in, left the engine running a second too long before killing it, and stepped out. The pumps were dusty, rust flaking from the base. A cicada landed on his arm and screamed. He swatted it off with a muttered curse and walked inside. The door creaked. The bell above it didn't ring so much as wheeze. The air was stale but cold. AC must have been going for hours in a sealed room. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed like hornets, and the shelves were half empty. Dust on the snack bags. A few faded soda logos on the cooler doors in the back. An old man sat behind the counter. He didn't look up. Just read from a tattered newspaper that had yellowed around the edges. Brad said, "Evenin'," and got no reply. He grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of chips, something to crunch on during the drive back. Then, just before paying, his stomach clenched. A slow roll, low in the gut, warning him. The kind of pain that doesn't just go away. Bathroom? He asked out the old man didn't look up. Just pointed. Brad followed the motion, heading to a narrow hall in the back. One bare bulb overhead. A faded sign on a door that read, "Restroom customers only." Someone had scratched through the word "only" with a key. The door creaked open, and the first thing Brad noticed was the mirror, tall, cracked down the middle like a spider web. The sink beneath it was stained brown, not blood. Just old water, maybe. The stall door hung open, and he stepped in, trying not to breathe too deep. The toilet was clean enough, though the tank lid didn't match, beige plastic on top of a porcelain bowl. He did his business quickly, unease prickling the back of his neck the whole time. When he tried the door, it didn't budge. He pushed harder. Rattled the knob. Still stuck. Brad leaned into it with his shoulder. The door shook, but stayed firm. "Hey," he called out. "This thing's jammed." No answer. He banged louder. "Hey!" Then the light flickered. Once, twice. And then the bulb above him popped, plunging the bathroom into a dim, throbbing gray. The only light came from a small red exit sign above the hallway door, just enough to cast a sick glow through the frosted glass vent in the top corner. He backed up, confused, unsettled. That's when he heard it, a soft click behind him, like the sound of a shoe shifting on tile. He spun. Hard hammering. Empty. The stall door now shut. He was sure it had been open when he came in. Brad felt the hair on his arms rise. The air was colder now, or maybe it was just him. He reached for the stall door and pushed it open. Nothing. Just the toilet. But the lid was down. He hadn't done that. There was a smear on the lid now. A faint handprint. Small, wet dash, looking. Too small to be his. Brad backed out, turned toward the main door again. Grabbed the knob with both hands and pulled hard. Still. Nothing. The door wouldn't open. He kicked it. Yelled. Still no answer. He pounded until his knuckles throbbed. Then something whispered his name, soft. Hissing. Bradley. He turned. Fast. The mirror. It wasn't cracked anymore. The spiderweb fracture was gone. But something else was wrong. His reflection wasn't moving. He stepped forward, breath catching. The man in the mirror stood still, frozen, his own face staring back, mouth closed, eyes wide, but not matching his movements. And then the reflection. Smile. Not him. The thing in the glass grinned, its teeth too wide, its eyes hollowing out into black pits that pulsed like coals. Brad stumbled back. Breath rasping. Bang. The stall door slammed shut again, and then again. And again. Bang, 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 like something inside was trying to get out. The smell changed. Sour. Coppery. Rotting. Brad gagged. The toilet flushed on its own. Then the mirror shattered. Loud, sharp, blinding. Glass rained across the floor. He threw his arms up, slicing his palm open. The door behind him creaked. Not open. Inward. It opened inward. It never should have. Bathroom doors always open out. Always. But it had swung in, like a slow, cruel invitation, and something stepped through. Didn't see it, just felt it. A heat against his neck. The weight of breath. The rustle of something dragging. His vision blurred. The walls felt closer. He ran, or tried to. Stumbled through the door that now hung open behind him. But the hallway didn't lead to the store anymore. It led somewhere else. Long, twisting, covered in tile. Lights flickering above every few feet. He ran down the corridor, calling for help, screaming now, slipping on wet tile. Though there hadn't been water before, he turned a corner and found another bathroom door. Same as before. He pushed it open, and there it was again. The same sink, the same mirror, the same stall. Only this time, the stall door wasn't just shut. It was locked. And something whispered from inside. Leave something behind. Or stay. His voice. From the stall. Exactly his voice. Brad screamed and pounded the walls. No exit sign. No handle on the inside of the door anymore. The bathroom had sealed itself again. It always did. Outside, the old man turned the newspaper's page. Glanced toward the hallway, then away. Another one in. He reached below the counter, pulled out a box of keys. All mismatched. All rusted. Each with a name. He added a new one. Bradley Minter, scratched in with a knife. He set it on the shelf and waited for the next one. She came in around 2:43 a.m. wearing an oversized sweater that clung to her like wet paper. The air that rushed in with her was damp, warm despite the hour, like the night had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Outside, the lights above. Pump number 2 buzzed, flickering in that old sick yellow that never reached the edges of the lot. The woman didn't look right. She didn't look wrong exactly, but you know when someone just doesn't sit well in your eyes? Like static on a clean screen. The kind of thing your brain tries to blink away. Gary, a 12, was manning the overnight shift at Townie's Mini Mart out on Route 70, just outside Vernon. Back then, he was 26, working 2 jobs to pay for his girlfriend's hospital bills. She'd been in a car accident a few months earlier, and their kid, Caleb, hadn't made it. Gary didn't talk much after that. Just worked. Ate. Smoked. Worked again. She came in with the baby wrapped in a blue and white knit blanket. She held him with one arm, loose like a sack of flour, and in her other hand was a bottle of grape soda she hadn't paid for yet. "Do you have diapers?" she asked, not looking up. Her voice sounded far away, not tired. Just removed, like a recording played back through tin. Gary nodded toward aisle 3. She stared down the rows for a while, then walked toward it without saying another word. She never came back. Gary waited, listening to the hum of the fridge units, the low hiss of the ice machine cycling through in. The back. He gave her a few minutes, then called out, "Ma'am?" Nothing. Just the soda fizzing gently on the counter next to the baby. He looked over at the kid. Big, glassy eyes. Quiet, but watching. Still as anything. Not asleep, just. Still. He rounded the counter and followed the aisle. No one. He even checked the storeroom and the restroom. Nada. He thought maybe she'd snuck out, but the door hadn't opened and the chime never rang. She was just gone. The baby was still there when the morning shift arrived. Still wrapped in that same blanket, still staring. He hadn't made a sound all night. Police came, child services. They took statements. Gary got grilled pretty hard, but there was nothing on the security tapes except her walking in and him pointing to aisle 3. After that, she just flickered, gone between frames. No exit, no motion blur. Like one of those movie jump cuts. They tried to take the baby, but he screamed. Not like a normal baby scream. This one sent the paramedic to his knees, holding his ears like someone had rammed nails into them. The rookie officer vomited. The lights above the checkout burst in sync. The baby? He didn't cry. Not after. Just looked up at them like he was waiting. They left him there. No one said it officially, but after 2 attempts to remove him, both ending with more people in the ER than not, they quietly built a glass enclosure around the counter, like a nursery display. Plexiglass, padded bottom, air holes drilled along the top. They started calling him the boy. Gary stayed another year. Said the baby didn't need feeding, didn't need changing. He just was. Every once in a while, a customer would ask what the noise was in the back, a soft crying, like someone rocking a cradle in an empty room. Gary would tell them there was no one back there. Just the freezer. He tried to quit. Twice. First time, he got as far as Lubbock before waking up behind the store with a nosebleed and 6 missed calls from a number that didn't exist. Second time, he walked into the sheriff's office and asked for help. They sent someone back with him, Deputy Larson. He's the one who started hearing the voices. Claimed they were coming from the soda cooler. Said they whispered in his father's voice, even though his old man had been dead 10 years. Gary didn't try to quit again. Then the customers started changing. You'd get these types at night, lone drivers, truckers, folks who didn't blink enough. They'd come in, stand by the baby's case and murmur things. Sometimes in other languages, sometimes in numbers. One guy recited Bible verses backward until his gums bled. A woman brought a bouquet of dried flowers and left them on the counter. Eyes rolled white the whole time. The baby never moved. But the crying from the back never stopped. By 1991, they'd bricked up the storeroom entirely. Left only a locked steel door. The noise just came through the walls now. Low. Wet. It didn't matter. Folks stopped asking about it. The clerk after. Gary Tom Bledsoe went deaf in one ear after a night shift. Said it felt like something whispered directly into his skull. He quit and now teaches in San Angelo. Won't talk about it. In 1997, a group of teens broke in on Halloween, dared each other to touch the case. Only 2 of them made it out. One of the girls lost all her teeth. Said the baby smiled at her and everything fell out. Another kid just walked into the highway and kept walking until a semi took him out near Wichita Falls. The case is still there. The crying still comes from the back. The baby, if you can call it that, doesn't look like it used to. It's taller now, though it hasn't stood. The blanket's rotten through, but it's still wrapped around whatever that thing is. The face doesn't blink anymore. The mouth doesn't open. But every now and then, right before dawn, the lights flicker, the soda fridge lets out a slow hiss and every cooler door fogs up from the inside, and in the fog, handprints appear. Small ones. There's a new clerk now. Name's Russ. He doesn't look at the counter anymore. Wears headphones. Says it's just easier that way. But he told someone once, real quiet, when the store was empty and the wind wasn't moving. He said the baby isn't looking at you. It's looking past you, like it's watching something come in behind you. Something that never left in 1987. Something that still wants its child. Back? Or worse, something that never had a child in the first place. Asterisk. If you ask locals about the gas station just south of El Dorado, right, where Farm to Market Road 2129 splits off from the main drag, they'll give you a look. Not quite fear, not quite disbelief, but something in between. A tension around the mouth, a tightening of the jaw. Some will tell you it never existed. Some will say they've seen it, but only once. And only at night. And only a few will tell you not to stop there. Clay Palmer didn't believe in ghost stories. He was 38 years old, divorced, a father to a girl who only replied to his texts when she needed money. He'd driven trucks for 12 years and only recently started working for a freight logistics company out of San Angelo, running smaller contracts, generators, fencing, supplies between oil fields and nowhere towns. He left San Angelo late that night, around 10:30, with a flatbed of copper wire and PVC stacked high. Just a quick job to a staging site in Big Wells, easy miles, mostly empty roads. He figured he'd stop in El Dorado for gas and a Dr. Pepper. The thing is, he didn't remember El Dorado having a station past the second blinking light. Last time he came through, he'd made the mistake of pushing his tank too far and nearly ran out. But tonight, sure as hell, there it was, lit up like Christmas, neon buzzing against the darkness. Easy serve, open all night. The sign read "Clean concrete." Pumps that didn't look ancient. Big glass windows glowing warm, shelves. Inside stocked full. He could even see a girl working the counter, red shirt, blonde ponytail. He pulled in, engine grumbling, and rolled down the window. The air smelled like sagebrush and warm gravel. Normal enough. He got out, the crunch of his boots echoing louder than he liked in the stillness. The pump clicked when he pulled the handle. Free, and the screen, digital, newer than most he'd seen in these parts, flashed, "Welcome, Clay." That made him pause. The pump knew his name. He looked around. The road behind him stretched off into black. A single truck passed in the distance, headlights white and narrow. The girl inside the station waved politely. Maybe she'd keyed in his name somehow. Maybe it was a joke. He filled the tank. No trouble. No weird smell. No shadows creeping up his spine. But the pump kept going. He watched as the numbers clicked past 20, then 30, then 40. His Dodge didn't hold that much. He clicked it off manually. That's when he noticed something strange. The street lights on the edge of the parking lot weren't casting shadows. The tall lamp nearest the truck should have thrown a hard line across the concrete, but it didn't. It was like the light just ... Stop. He went inside. The bell above the door dinged pleasantly. Air conditioning breathed cool against his skin. The girl at the counter smiled, but didn't speak. "Hey," Clay said. "You all open regular hours or just after 10? She tilted her head. The smile stayed, unmoving. "Pump said my name." "That normal?" he asked. Her hand moved slowly, pointing to a rack of chips and drinks. "You want me to buy something?" Still, no response. He stepped forward. Something wasn't right about the place. It was too clean, too ... new, like a stage set built for an audience that never showed up. The shelves were full, but all the labels were faded. All the candy was off-brand. Every bottle of soda had the same expiration date, August 6, 1993. "Look, I just want to pay and get on my way," Clay muttered. The girl blinked slow, too slow, and turned around. Walked through a back door that didn't creak, didn't swing. It just sort of opened for her. And then she was gone. Clay stepped up to the register. It was on. No price. Just the word, "Stay." He backed away. Outside, the lights had dimmed. Not off, just low. Like someone had turned the contrast down. His truck looked hazy, like it was being remembered badly. He pushed through the door. It didn't. Ding this time. The gravel underfoot felt softer. He climbed in and slammed the door, key twisting hard. The engine groaned once, twice, then caught. He didn't look back, not once. When he hit the main road again, the headlights caught the sign. Easy serve. Thank you. The S flickered. It took him 2 hours to reach Big Wells, when he stopped too. Check the load straps. He noticed something smeared on the rear window of the cab. Stay. Written in a dark, greasy streak. He scrubbed it off with his sleeve. Kept driving. Never looked back. 3 days later, he passed back through El Dorado during the afternoon. Clear skies. Hot sun. He pulled over where he remembered the station had been. There was nothing there. No lights, no concrete, no canopy. Just dried weeds. A fence falling over itself, a patch of gravel shaped, vaguely like a parking lot. He asked the cashier at the local hardware store, "Hey, there used to be a gas station out past the turnoff, right?" The woman laughed. "You must be new." "That place? Burned down in '93. Faulty wiring. Killed the owner's daughter. Poor thing was working late, just graduated high school. Real sad story." Clay nodded, throat dry. "People say she still shows up sometimes," she added, half joking. "Only at night. Only if you really need gas." Clay never took that route again, but sometimes, late at night, when he drove long hauls through West Texas and the tank ran low, he swore he could see that neon sign blinking faintly out in the brush, just off the highway, welcoming him back. It was the last stretch of I-35 before it split toward Laredo. That empty run through South Texas where the mesquite trees knot up like old hands and the horizon turns to static. The sun had just gone down, bleeding orange into a dull bruised purple, and the heat still shimmered off the road like ghosts too stubborn to lie down. Bryce wasn't supposed to be there. His GPS had rerouted him after a wreck near San Antonio sent him through this winding back highway that never seemed to end. He was headed to McAllen for a contracting job, nothing special. Just drywall and electrical fixes at a rundown apartment complex, but this detour had stretched a 6-hour drive into 8. Now he was bone-tired, hadn't eaten since morning, and the gas gauge on his old Silverado had dipped just beneath a quarter tank. He passed 3 towns that weren't really towns. Just half-burned signage, a boarded-up cafe, and nothing moving but the cicadas. He figured if he didn't find gas soon, he'd be walking. When he saw the faded yellow sign flickering ahead like a cigarette lighter in the dark, it felt like a blessing. Petrol King, open 24 hours. It sat like an afterthought between nowhere and more nowhere. The station was a squat brick thing, with one overhang that listed to the side like it had a bad hip. There were 3 pumps out front, one taped off with caution ribbon and the other 2 lit by flickering fluorescents. A glowing Coke machine buzzed near the door, and inside the windows, a ceiling fan turned so slowly it might have been stopped. Bryce pulled up to pump 2, killed the engine, and cracked his neck. He rolled down the window for Boomer, his pit mix, who was sprawled out in the passenger seat with his tongue hanging and his tail twitching with every bug that buzzed past the cracked glass. The dog let out a low growl that wasn't quite a bark. Bryce ignored it. The air smelled like rain that never comes. Dry ozone and distant static. The kind of weather where thunder rolls but nothing falls. Bryce got out and stretched. He fumbled with his card, found the slot jammed with a crumpled receipt, and muttered under his breath as he walked toward them. The bell above the station door didn't chime so much as snap like a bone cracking under slow pressure. Inside was cool, unnaturally so. Rows of dusty candy bars and expired jerky lined the shelves. There was a single cooler near the back, humming softly like it was singing to itself. Behind the counter sat a man, or someone trying to be a man. He was still. That was the first thing Bryce noticed. Too still. His eyes were open but wrong somehow, like doll's eyes, too flat. The man's namatag read Dale. His hands rested on the counter, perfectly symmetrical, long fingers stretching out like spider legs across the formica. "Pump 2, Bryce said, placing a 20 on the counter, "and a Coke." The man didn't answer, just moved, slow and stiff, slid the cash away, and pressed a button under the counter without ever breaking eye contact. Then he nodded once, barely. Bryce waited, half expecting some muttered word, maybe a thanks, or have a good night. But nothing came. The silence inside was too thick. It felt watched. He took the Coke and left, fast walking back to his truck. Pump 2 was ready. He twisted the cap and stuck the nozzle in. That's when he saw the writing faded black Sharpie on the pump casing, nearly rubbed away by time and sun. "Fill up. Shut up. Don't look left." He squinted. That couldn't be right. He rubbed at it with his thumb, like maybe it was old graffiti or a joke. But it wasn't. The letters were deliberate, sharp, fresh, almost. Bryce turned his head, slowly, curious. Just a little, just enough to almost. "Look left." Boomer barked. Hard. A sudden snarl of warning, loud and fierce. It snapped Bryce back. He gasped, blinked, and stared dead ahead. He hadn't seen anything. Not really. Just a blur. A flicker in the corner of his eye. A shape, maybe. Like a man or a tree or something older. Something bigger. Boomer was still growling, fur up, staring out the passenger window. Bryce forced a laugh, tried to shake it off. "Jumpy old mutt," he mumbled, but the pump was slower than usual. The numbers crawled. The screen glitched once, flickering from $4.72 to $3.13, then back again. And for a moment, just a split second, he swore the screen showed words instead of numbers. It knows now. He stared at it. The gas clicked off. Bryce's heart skipped. He holstered the nozzle and slid into the driver's seat with a grunt. Boomer wouldn't calm down. Not until they were a mile down the road. Bryce cracked the window again and drank his Coke too fast, wiping the sweat from his temples. What the hell was that? He said, to no one. He tried the radio. Just static. He turned on his phone. Dead. It had been at 60%. Before they pulled in, that's when he checked the mirror. A smear on the rear windshield. No, a handprint. Long, too long. Wet, like it had been made with something thick and cold. Not blood, not dirt. Something else. Like oil and ash, Bryce slammed the brakes, heart pounding, and got out. Boomer followed, tail down, gears back. The rear window was clean, but the handprint was now on the driver's side mirror. He spun. Looked left. Nothing but mesquite and dust and the fading lights of Petrol King in the distance. Boomer whimpered. They didn't stop again that night. Not until they reached the edge of McAllen and the first real lights of the city cut through the dark like safety. Bryce got the job. Stayed in a cheap motel for 3 weeks. Tried to forget, but the gas station followed. Every reflective surface started acting strange. Not always, but sometimes. When he passed by car windows at night, when he looked into the black screen of his TV before it turned on, sometimes the reflection wasn't quite right. He'd be brushing his teeth, and his mirrored self would stop. First, then smile. And now, something knocks at the motel window every night at 3:33 a.m. Not once, not twice. 3 times. Slow and deliberate. And every morning he wakes up with a new smear on the mirror, left side only. He tried driving back to Petrol King to see if it was real, if he imagined it. But it wasn't there. No sign, no station. Just cracked pavement and Twisted Weeds. Locals just shrugged when he asked. No station out that way, one said. Used to be one, long gone, burned down, years ago. He asked when. The man's QUINTED. Double quotes, maybe ... 2007. Some drifter filled up and saw something. Walked into the field beside the station and never came out. Bryce said nothing. He went home. Then smashed every mirror in the motel room. Covered the TV in towels. Turned all screens to the wall. But last night he looked left again. Only a little. Only a glimpse. And now he hears it. Breathing. Right outside the door. Tonight will be the third knock. He knows it. Boomer won't stop shaking. And in the reflection of the dark window glass, something moves. Smiling. Waiting. Because once you look left at Petrol King, it knows where to find you. The Barrow Creek Gas and Quick Mart sat alone off the westbound shoulder of Highway 62, just past where the road started to ripple from the desert heat. It wasn't much to look at. 2 faded pumps out front, a bent metal awning drooping like an old man's eyelid, and a single dusty Coke machine that hadn't worked since Bush Sr. was president. But the lights always stayed on. That was the strange part. Even during the ice storm last year when the entire town went dark, Barrow Creek's canopy lights glowed steady blue-white like nothing had happened. Most people in the county whispered things about that place, especially about Pump 6. If you drove past it after midnight, you'd see that pump clicking by itself, counting up invisible gallons. Other times, the receipt printer would spit out paper even if no one had swiped a card. Most just chalked it up to faulty wiring. The town was full of bad wiring and worse luck. But those who worked the night shift, those who'd filled their tank after sundown, they knew something was wrong, not broken. Just off. Darren was one of those who didn't listen to stories. Big guy, 32, used to haul livestock across the panhandle. 2 divorces under his belt and a shoulder injury that kept him from lifting full feed bags. After a short stint in Lubbock, he moved back to Odessa to be closer to his aging father. Took up deliveries parts mostly across West Texas. That night, he'd been on a run to drop off a set of brake drums and hobs. Made good time, hit the return leg before midnight. His truck's fuel light popped on about 10 miles east of Barrow Creek. There were closer stops, sure. But something in him, it might have been the desert silence or the way the stars pressed down too close, told him to stop there. At Barrow Creek, just a splash of gas to make it home. He pulled into the lot at 12:21 a.m. The store itself was closed, dark behind the glass. But the pumps still blinked to life like obedient little soldiers. He rolled up to Pump 6 because it was the only one not roped off. The others had yellow caution tape flapping in the breeze. He figured that meant nothing. He'd seen plenty of broken stations with one working line. He got out and stretched. The desert wind smelled like rust. No bugs, no animals. Just the dry electric hum of the canopy light above him. He looked around and saw no cameras. No attendant. Just himself, his dusty blue pickup, and the sound of something metal creaking gently under the pump. When he swiped his card, it didn't work at first. The screen flashed processing. Longer than it should, single quotes Veddat, then came a thump. From the pump itself, not from inside the mechanism. From lower, beneath the concrete. It came again. Louder. Thump. Like a fist against metal. Not once, twice. Then 3 slow, steady knocks. Each one timed with the blinking cursor on the screen. He stepped back. The card still half inserted. The pump dinged. Approved. Begin fueling. But Darren didn't reach for the handle. Something inside the pump had moved. No, not inside the pump. Below it. He looked down at the base where the concrete met the steel column. There was a seam there, just wide enough to notice, and it was bleeding, a thin line of dark red oozing from the crack. It dripped slow, thick like syrup. He leaned closer without realizing why. Some sick part of him thought maybe a line had ruptured hydraulic fluid, or oil maybe. Then he saw the fingernail dot. It was pale, clean, female, pressed against the gap like it was pushing up from beneath dot, and then a face. Only for a second, but enough dot an eye. Wide, bloodshot, human. A woman's eye, screaming without sound. Darren jerked back. He almost slipped on the wet pavement behind him. The gas nozzle clicked loose and swung down, hissing air like a serpent. The screen still blinked. Remove nozzle. Begin fueling dot, and from beneath the pump, the thumping returned dot faster now, like panic. He backed toward his truck and reached for his phone. Dot, no signal. Dead screen. He hadn't noticed it die, but it had. He swore at the useless rectangle and looked. Back toward the pump. The base of it was cracking. Hairline splits snaking across the concrete like ice on glass. Something beneath was pressing upward. Dot, no dot, someone dot. He turned and opened the driver's side door. Dot, from behind him came a new sound. The click of a trunk unlocking, but it wasn't his. Dot, it came from behind the pump. From the shadows, there was a car there now. He hadn't seen it before. A tan Mercury Grand Marquis, early 90s, covered in dust. Windows FOGGED. The trunk sat open a few inches. From inside came a voice. Muffled. Help me. He froze. It was a woman's voice. Then again, louder. Please, please help me. He stepped closer despite every warning in his body screaming no. The trunk opened another inch. He couldn't see much, just darkness inside. But there was a smell, like wet dirt and perfume and rotting paper. The voice came again. Don't leave me. He's coming. Darren squinted at the car. It wasn't running. No keys in the ignition. No lights, just there. Like it had always been. He took one more step toward the trunk. Then the voice changed. Same words. Different tone. Don't leave me. He's coming. Robotic, flat, like it was being played on a loop. Don't leave me. He's coming. Darren turned back toward the truck. Something was moving on the pump now. The metal panel where the price should have shown was bulging, stretching outward like skin under pressure. The thumping returned. Then the screen on the pump changed. Welcome, Darren. Thank you for returning. He ran. The wind had died completely. Even the sound of his own boots on pavement sounded far away. He got in the truck. Turned the key. Nothing. Dashboard lit. Then flickered. Then died. The radio came on by itself. Not music. Not news. A single recording. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then again. Knock. Knock. He screamed and pounded the steering wheel. The radio hissed and crackled, and then he heard breathing, not through the speakers, from the back seat. He turned slowly, heart thundering. There was a woman there. Naked. Eyes open wide, mouth sewn shut, blood leaking from her nose. Her fingers were pressed against the seat, and her skin was covered in names. Hundreds of names carved into her like a ledger. At the top of her chest, right beneath her collarbone, it was freshly etched. Darren Cole. She lunged at him, but her body collapsed halfway, like a puppet with strings cut. Her head hit the seat and rolled sideways, her stitched lips still twitching like she was trying to scream. He fell out of the truck, hit the pavement hard, and crawled backwards. The Mercury's trunk slammed shut. Pump's display now flashed a new message. She's in all of them. Every trunk. Every night. Then the lights cut out. When they found Darren the next morning, he was lying face down in the dirt 30 feet from his truck. No injuries, no signs of struggle. Just unconscious, twitching in his sleep like he was dreaming something too large for his body to hold. They took him to the county hospital. He wouldn't speak for 3 days. When he finally opened his mouth, all he said was this: "She's still knocking." And one night, I might just answer. It started with a yawn and ended with blood in the air. Brennan had been on the road for 7 hours straight, and by the time he pulled off the narrow shoulder of Farm to Market Road 1027, he was fighting sleep with the manic aggression of a poitin of a paave. Man who knew the dark could do things when his eyes were closed. He wasn't superstitious, not really. But something about this stretch of highway between Paint Rock and some unnamed ranch town gave him the crawling itch. The kind that made you check your rearview mirror too many times, as if the trees had teeth. His GPS had long since given up, just a blue dot in a sea of pixelated green. When the gaslight chimed at him and the road narrowed to gravel, he spotted the station, like it had been waiting. Just one floodlight on a crooked pole out front, buzzing with what sounded like dying hornets. A single fuel pump, the kind you had to flip the handle on manually. Concrete cracked with weeds. A storefront that might have once been white, now stained the color of dried tobacco spit. No name, no brand dot, just a flickering sign in the window. That read open dot inside. It smelled like mold and kerosene. Shelves leaned under the weight of stale chips and canned meat with labels curling at the edges. The cooler held one brand of soda, all the same flavor, and all of them slightly fogged with age. The clerk was behind the counter. Tall, rail-thin, skin pale in the jaundiced light like paper left in vinegar. He wore a black vest over a white button-up that had yellowed beneath the arms. A name tag that had once read Ken was scratched halfway to hell. The man didn't say a word as Brennan entered. Didn't blink. Just stood still, hands clasped in front of him like he was waiting for a prayer or a confession. Just gas. Brennan mumbled, and maybe a soda. The clerk nodded slowly. Brennan grabbed the least dusty bottle and stepped up to the counter. That's when he noticed the man's eyes. They were too dry, like the surface of a desert. The whites tinged brown, no capillaries. Just sunburnt bone behind the iris. He blinked dot and the man moved. Not fast, not slow. Just reposition dot. He was 2 feet closer dot. No sound, no footsteps. Just there dot. Brennan blinked again, startled. The man was now on the other side of the counter dot. No movement in between. Just gone from one spot to another dot. Brennan dropped the bottle dot. It cracked but didn't break. He backed up, palms up. "Hey man, sorry, I just want gas." "I didn't mean anything." The clerk smiled. His teeth were too many. That was Brennan's first thought. Not crooked or yellow or even sharp. Just too many. "I wouldn't blink again," the clerk said. His voice was papery, like something read aloud from an old obituary. Brennan turned. The exit was still open. Still there. He didn't wait. He ran out to his car, gravel crunching under his boots. Shoved the keys into the ignition. The clerk was beside the pump now. He hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard him. Just blinked while running, and there he was dot closer dot. Brennan gunned it. Tires screamed. The tail end fishtailed into the road, dust rising like ghosts in the headlights. Miles passed in silence. He didn't look in the mirrors, didn't stop to breathe, didn't even think. Not until his phone buzzed in the console. One notification dot. No signal, and yet a text message appeared. Don't blink. He tossed the phone into the back seat and glanced into the rear view. On instinct dot. Nothing dot. The car was empty dot. Just him and the wheezing engine. Then, just ahead another station, identical to the one he'd just left. Same cracked concrete dot. Same crooked floodlight dot. Same flickering open sign. Brennan's stomach dropped. He drove past it, pushing 70 now, but 5 minutes later, There it was again. Same place. Same everything. The floodlight buzzed, like it knew his name. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, heart pounding. The clerk was now standing at the side of the road, facing him. Past the figure, tires whispering on gravel. Didn't stop, didn't breathe. He blinked. The clerk was in his rear view. He turned on the radio. Static. Every station. Even the Spanish ones. Then a voice cut through. Closer. It said. Brennan swerved. Half off the road. The voice wasn't in the radio. It was in the back seat. He didn't dare look. He didn't blink. He kept his eyes wide until they burned. 10 more miles. 15. Town had to be close. Any town. Then he saw the headlights behind him, flickering, not from a car. They pulsed. Like breathing. He risked a glance. The clerk was in the car behind him, not driving, just sitting in the passenger seat, staring. No one behind the wheel. He blinked. He was gone. No car behind him now. He turned forward. The clerk was standing in the middle of the road. Brennan slammed the brakes. Too late. There was impact, but no sound. No crunch, no scream. Just darkness. He opened his eyes. His car was parked. He didn't remember stopping. Didn't remember the road ending. Didn't remember falling asleep. He looked around. The gas station was ahead. Same one, still open. He looked to his right. The clerk was standing at his window, inches from the glass. Hand pressed against it. His eyes were gone now, just empty sockets, and yet somehow they were watching. Brennan blinked. The clerk vanished. He turned. The man was in the back seat. Smiling. Whispering. You blinked. They told Jed not to stay overnight in Sweetwater. Told him straight at the feed store in Snyder, where the clerk bagging his supplies went stiff when he said he'd be delivering fencing out that way after sundown. The old man behind him grizzled, tobacco-stained, put a hand on his shoulder and muttered, "Best drive through, son. Don't sleep there. Not in your truck. Not with your engine off." Jed had laughed it off. The kind of local nonsense you hear in every dusty Texas town. Ghost stories and prairie witch tales. He'd heard enough of those growing up in Pecos. Woman in the window, coyote that talks, tree that grows backwards. Most were just distractions from the ache of living out here. You had to believe in something after the land took everything else from you, but Sweetwater was different. The sun dropped fast as he came down 70, the sky turning the color of rusted nails. The air grew still, wind dying flat. It was August, and everything looked dry enough to snap. Mesquite shadows stretched across the dirt like twisted bones. When he finally rolled into town, there wasn't much to see, a few broken-down homes. A hollowed-out Dairy Queen, a boarded gas station with a sign that read, "Closed for good, bless you." Still, he had a fence to drop at the ranch north of town and no daylight left to turn back. So he found a pull-off behind what might have once been a church. The steeple was gone, just a jagged hole like something had punched up through it. He parked, killed the lights, and let the engine hum itself quiet. That was the last moment of silence he got. The first noise was faint, just a shift, like something settling on the roof of his truck. He froze. Then it came again, heavier, like weight pressing down. Thump. Creak. Then something dragged. A scrape, like claws across metal. He snapped upright and looked through the windshield. Nothing but the moonlight on gravel. He got out, walked around the truck, flashlight in hand. Shined it on the roof. Nothing. No raccoon. No cat. No prankster. Just Texas night and heat waves rising off the hood. Back inside the cab. He left the door unlocked, just in case he needed to bolt. Then he heard it again. Thump. Creak. It was heavier now. Slower. Jed didn't sleep. Just sat there, fingers on the ignition switch, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes the truck shifted, groaned under weight. A long breath of metal dot, and then came the tapping dot. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Knuckles or claws dragging across the roof, tapping in patterns. Sometimes it tapped 3 times, then silence. Then again, faster. Like it was waiting. Like it wanted a response. He stayed like that until sunrise, when the noise stopped, just as sudden as it had started. When he got out, he saw long, thin scratches down the hood of his truck. Not like keys, not like twigs. These were deep, like something strong had raked through the steel. The drive back to Snyder was quiet. Too quiet. Even the radio didn't work right. Static mostly. Occasionally, just barely, he swore he heard breathing under it. Jed told himself it was exhaustion. Heat stroke. Hallucination dot until it followed him home dot. It started again 3 nights later. He lived in an old farmhouse west of Hermleigh. Rural. Fenced, dogs in the yard. That first night, the dogs didn't bark. They howled once and then went dead quiet. He turned off the TV, walked to the window, and stared into the dark. The moonlight hit the roof of his shed just right, and he saw it. A silhouette. Something crouched low and wide. Not a man. Not an animal. Its limbs were too long, knees too bent, like it was built wrong and didn't care who saw. And it turned. Its head. He backed away, slowly, quietly. The lights in the house flickered. Then he heard it leap. The heavy sound of a body landing on the roof of his home, followed by a slow drag of claws on shingles. He didn't sleep that night either. For weeks, it happened again and again. Sometimes at work, he'd return to find deep grooves etched across his truck hood. Sometimes at home, he'd wake to find bird bones arranged in crosses on his porch. Sometimes he heard the tapping. 3 short taps, pause, then 5 more, like a message he couldn't decode. He tried salt across the door. Didn't work. He nailed crosses on the windows. It laughed. He didn't hear it with his ears. He felt it in his bones, vibrating up through the floorboards. He installed cameras. They only recorded static after midnight. He went to Sweetwater, desperate to find someone. Anyone who could tell him what the hell this thing was. But Sweetwater had changed. Every building stood, but the windows were black, and the air felt wrong. Like the place had died, but no one had buried it. No cars, no people. Just empty homes and silent streets. The only thing that moved was a curtain on the 2nd floor of the old motel. Even though every door was chained shut. In town square, he found a mural flaking off a wall. It was almost gone, but the center showed a figure crouched on a roof. Arms like spider legs, staring down at a truck. No face. Just pits where eyes should have been. Burnt underneath it was a warning. Never kill your engine. Never look up. Never acknowledge. Jed left town. But the thing DIDN single quotes T. Now, it came every night. Some nights it just watched. He never heard it climb. It was just there, the weight above his bed. Other nights, it moved. Skittered, scraped, knocked. 3 short taps. 5 long scrapes. His neighbors stopped speaking to him. Said his house sounded wrong after dark. Said they saw something moving along the ridge of his roof when the moon was out. He stopped going out. He stopped talking, stopped eating, started counting the taps, started tapping back. And that was the last anyone saw Jed alive. His house still stands. The dogs are gone. The fence has collapsed. No one will go near it. Not even kids on dares. Because they say if you park out front and kill your engine, it starts. Not the thing. The pattern. Tap. 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 Silence. Then the creak. Then the breath. And if you look up, even once, you don't look back down again. It started at the kind of place you'd only stop if you were desperate, the El Camino Gas and Wash out on the edge of Kingsland, Texas. The kind of station that still used fluorescent lights that flickered and buzzed like hornets in a tin can. The kind where the cashier never looked up from her phone and the bathroom key hung from a cinder-block-sized plank of wood. Mostly, it was just lonely, quiet, off the main road. One dusty pump still worked, and half the time it didn't recognize. Your car. Eli Mercer pulled in late that August evening, dog-tired and piss-soaked from a 6-hour haul hauling fertilizer out of Lubbock. The truck stank. The AC had gone out halfway, and his right foot was cramping so bad he limped when he got out of the cab. He popped the tank open and started pumping, swatting gnats and staring out across the lot at the small, bug-spattered squeegee bin. That bin. That filthy little concrete trough filled with gray water and half a floating sponge like a piss-colored swamp. The squeegee stuck out of it like a broken flagpole. He didn't even really know why he walked over. Habit, maybe. The kind of muscle memory truckers fall into when their brain's long gone to highway hypnosis. He just figured he'd wash the windshield. The bugs were so thick across it you'd swear he'd driven through a plague. Eli grabbed the squeegee and lifted it. He never finished the motion. There was a sound, not quite a splash, not quite a slither, like a wet mop sliding across skin. Then a hiss. Fast and sharp, like a tire releasing pressure. Then he saw a dot. It wasn't a bug. Not really. Too many joints. Too many ridges. The color of spoiled meat, glistening. It coiled under the handle, where the squeegee met the plastic grip, slick and hunched like a spider with its back arched. But it had fingers. 3, long and blackened and almost delicate. It gripped the edge of the bin like it was pulling itself up, and he saw a slit where its face should be. No eyes, no nostrils, just that slit, pulsing. Opening and closing. It launched. Fast as a whip crack. It darted out and scuttled up Eli's arm before he could even scream. He stumbled backward, trying to swat it off, but it was under his shirt by then, its claws digging into his chest, through cloth, through skin. He shrieked, a high, raw sound that didn't sound like his own voice, and slammed himself against the side of his rig. Over and over. Blood bloomed across his shirt like spilled ink. Then it stopped. Silence. Eli staggered. His chest was bleeding, 3 tiny puncture marks in a triangle near his sternum, like a bat had sunk its teeth in. He tore the shirt off, looked wildly around the lot. Nothing, no movement. Just the hiss of the pump and the flickering blue of the overhead lights. He didn't say anything when he went inside. Just paid cash, avoiding the cashier's eyes. Drove away like a man late for a funeral. He called in sick the next morning, then didn't show up the day after that. The dispatcher found him 2 days later, holed up in his trailer, naked, covered, in shallow cuts. The kind you make when you're trying to dig something out of your skin. But that's just how it started. The real trouble came later. No one wanted the station after that. It sat empty for a while, boards over the windows. The tanks drained and rusting, but the squeegee bin stayed. No one touched it. You'd think it would dry out, but it didn't. Every few days, someone would report seeing condensation on the inside of the glass, even in the middle of winter. Like the bin was sweating. Then the kids started daring each other. Small-town Texas doesn't leave much room for entertainment. So they came in 2s and 3s, flashlights in hand, giggling and whispering like they were brave. Go touch the bin, they'd say. Lift the squeegee. They never did it more than once. Some said they felt something under the water, something that moved when you got close. Some said they heard whispering, too high-pitched to be human, like broken radios playing a language not meant for ears. A girl named Riley from the high school cross-country team passed out after touching the squeegee. Sobbed she felt it. crawling in her bones. She was never quite right after that. Bit her own tongue off in church during a sermon. The blood soaked right through the pew. And still, the thing weighted. They say it only comes out when you lift the squeegee. That's the rule. You have to do it slow, like you're coaxing it, like you're showing respect. It doesn't like sudden movements or being ignored. Carl Amos, the county health inspector, thought it was all bullshit. Came out one Tuesday morning in April to shut the place down for good. Walked right up to the bin with gloves and a bucket of bleach. Lifted the squeegee in one swift yank, ready to throw the whole thing into the trash. They found his body 2 days later, wedged behind the dumpster, curled into a fetal ball. No visible wounds, no cause of death, but his eyes had ruptured, exploded, inward, like something had sucked them out, and his spine twisted, snapped in 4 places like someone had folded him wrong. There's something about that squeegee, the way it waits in the bin like it knows you'll reach for it eventually. Something about the water that never dries, even when the sun beats down for 14 hours straight. Something about the fingers, the way they twitch just before you see them, the way they grab. And now it's spreading. Other stations, other towns, squeegees left overnight that look different the next morning. Kids whispering about movements in the window washer bins. One report said the water shimmered like it had breath, that the reflection in it didn't match what stood above it. They don't always crawl out, but when they do, they crawl into you. They say Eli wasn't the first. That something's been nesting inside the service stations of West Texas since before they built highways. That these creatures or things or spirits, whatever they are, they ride inside the tools we touch without thinking, hiding, breeding, waiting for the right moment to pull themselves free, stretch those long wet fingers and latch on. To skin. Now, no one in Kingsland touches the squeegees. No one washes their windshields at night, and no one lifts anything they didn't set down themselves, because something lives in that murky water. And when you lift the squeegee, you let it out. The wind coming down from the Guadalupe Mountains smells like dust and old bones. Dry and mean, the way West Texas air always is after dark. You drive long enough between El Paso and Fort Stockton, and you start to feel like the sun's never coming back. The land flattens out so much your mind starts to stretch with it, and there's just the road, the sky, and whatever's rattling inside your head. That's what it was like for Clay Mercer the night he pulled off I-10 near Van Horn. He wasn't supposed to be there. Hell, he wasn't supposed to be driving at all, not this late. But the job ran long, the warehouse shorted him on crates, and his dispatcher didn't give a damn how far past his logbook he was. So Clay did what a lot of truckers do when they're dead-eyed and half hallucinating. He kept driving. When his fuel gauge dipped low and the warning light flared like a slow blink, he cursed under his breath and scanned the black horizon for a glow. There were no towns in sight, just mesquite, cactus, and open space. He'd passed a sign for Van Horn maybe 10 miles back, but the exit ramp had been blocked off for road work, and his GPS was stuck buffering. Then, just as the engine started its first subtle hiccup, one of those quiet stutters that only a long hauler would notice, he saw it, a gas station. Just sitting there off the shoulder like it had grown out of the dirt. No brand name. Just the word fuel painted in red on a flickering sign that swayed gently in the wind. 2 pumps, an old glass booth, and a small convenience shack with a slanted tin roof that looked one dust storm away from collapse. The place didn't even look open, but the lights were on. The pumps were humming, and that same weird silence, too wide, too still, hung in the air like a net. Clay pulled in slow. Gravel popped under the tires, but there were no other cars, no footprints in the dust. He rolled down his window. The night air hit him hard, sharp with gasoline and something else. Not rot, not diesel. Something metallic and wrong. Like hot pennies. Like blood left out in the sun. He climbed out of the truck and walked toward Pump 2. The screen blinked on the second he got close. Pay first inside. Clay looked toward the booth. No one in it. No motion in the shack either. But the open sign buzzed faintly in the window, and a blue light flickered in the corner like a dying television. He walked across the lot, boots crunching in the gravel, and pushed open the door. A little bell rang overhead. Inside, the air was thick, humid, almost, and warm, like a mouth breathing on the back of your neck. The shelves were mostly empty. A few cans of motor oil, a roll of duct tape, and an entire rack of off-brand beef jerky that looked 20 years old. On the counter sat an ancient register and a row of those cheap lighters you used to see in gas stations that had cartoon skulls on them. But no clerk. No sound but the hum of the fluorescent bulbs above and the click of the ceiling fan blades that turned too slowly, like something was gumming up the works. Hello? Clay called. Nothing. He walked around the counter, expecting to find some guy passed out or maybe watching a phone, but there was nothing but a stool, a coffee mug full of dead moths, and a dusty black and white photo pinned to the back wall. He leaned in. It showed the station. Same building, same sign, but the photo looked old, like 60s old. In the picture were two men and a woman, all in overalls. One of the men had a rag in his back pocket and a cigarette in his hand. The woman's eyes were blank, like someone had erased them with a pencil. Written under the photo in faded ink was, "Don't take more than you need." Clay stepped back. And then the register beeped. The screen lit up green. It read, "Insert card for $20, valet flat rate. No buttons. No options." Clay hesitated, but his tank was almost dry. He slid his card. Approved blinked on the screen. Then, just under it, PUMP2 ready. Clay didn't like it. The place felt like it was holding its breath. But he walked out, watched the nozzle click loose on its own. When he lifted it, the pump rattled in his hand like something shifted inside. He started fueling. That's when he noticed the smell was stronger. Not gas. Blood that the wind had picked up. A steady hot breeze now, and every time it blew, that iron-rich stink got worse. Clay looked down. A dark red stain was spreading around the base of the pump. At first he thought it was a spill, maybe from some rusted pipeline or busted tank. But it was too thick, too viscous. And it shimmered in the light, then it moved. Just a ripple. Like something alive was shifting under the surface. He let go of the nozzle. It didn't stop pumping. He yanked it out. Gasoline sprayed up in an arc, splashed his boots. And the moment it hit the air, it turned darker. Not just dark red. Clay staggered back. The gas was red now, pouring out like blood from a severed artery. It ran down the pavement and hissed where it touched the truck's undercarriage. Then he saw the pavement, faces, reflected in the puddle. Dozens of them. Eyes wide, mouths open, as if screaming, except the puddle made no sound. They just stared up from the wet, writhing gasoline like they were trapped beneath a sheet of glass. Clay ran. He leapt into the cab, slammed the door, turned the key. The engine hesitated, then roared to life. He gunned it, throwing gravel and a storm behind him. Speeding back onto the highway. 2 miles down the road, his headlights caught a car pulled over, driver's side door open, hazards blinking. As he got closer, he saw the shape in the seat. A man. Or what was left of one. The skin was gone. All of it. Muscle and bone exposed like he'd been set on fire from the inside out. The eyes were intact, open, blood still bubbling from the nostrils. Clay swerved, drove on, mile marker after mile marker passed. More cars. More wrecks, all burned, all skinless. All no more than 2 or 3 miles from that station. By the time he reached Fort Stockton, the police found him shaking, incoherent, and half blind from bloodshot eyes. He told them everything. They searched the highway, found the bodies, but when they sent a cruiser back toward Van Horn, there was no gas station. Just SCRUBLAND. No sign. No shack, not even tire tracks. Clay's truck, half melted. Fuel tank warped like a crumpled soda can. And the pumps? Some say they show up every few months. Same spot, same deal. Only at night. Only when you're desperate. The fuel works just fine until you get 2 miles out, and then the engine seizes. The heat rises from under the seat, and you start to smell it. Copper. Pennies. Blood. That's when the fire starts, and no one's made it past the 3rd mile yet. He didn't even want to stop. That was the funny part. Funny in the way things are when you look back from too far away, like blood on a rearview mirror or laughter echoing from a house you know is empty. Cal Myers was just passing through. Highway 277, somewhere between Seymour and nowhere, running low on fuel and even lower on patience. The sun had dropped behind a ridge of low scrub and dead cotton, casting long shadows over the blacktop, and the only sign of life was a lone gas station blinking ahead like a bad idea you convince yourself is worth it. The lights flickered. The plastic open sign swung even though the wind had gone still, and the place looked like it hadn't seen a remodel since the Nixon era. Cal almost kept driving. He should have. He coasted up beside Pump 1, rolled down the window, and stuck his card into the reader. It didn't work. A line of static jumped across the tiny screen. Then a single word. Inside. He sighed, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and stepped out. The air smelled of hot dust and roadkill. No music, no bugs, just the buzz of the overhead. Fluorescence that gave the place a sick green glow. A dog barked once far off, then went silent. The bell over the door rang when he stepped in. The place was quiet. Still. Too still. There were chips on the shelf with logos from brands he hadn't seen since he was a kid. A soda cooler hummed like it had swallowed something alive and was struggling to keep it down. Behind the counter sat an old man, skin like crumpled wax. Paper, staring down at the register like it owed him something. Pump 1 didn't take my card, Cal said, walking up. Screen told me to come inside. The old man didn't look up, just nodded slowly like he'd heard that complaint 1,000 times and cared about none of them. Fill up? He asked, voice dry as dirt. Yeah. The man punched a few buttons, with fingers that bent the wrong way. That'll be 46 even. Cal handed over his card. The man swiped it, then hit print. The receipt came out with a noise like a whisper dragging its feet. Cal took it, glanced down. See you again yesterday. He frowned, looked back up. The man was gone, just not there. The stool behind the counter still rocked, creaking softly, but there was no one in sight. A sound from outside made him turn. The pump was already running. Cal stepped back out into the thick night air, blinking as the station lights buzzed and blinked like they were trying to send Morse code. He looked toward his car and stopped. It was already full. Hose returned to its cradle. Gas cap screwed on, but the pump still read $46, and the screen now blinked one word. Again. He reached for the receipt again. The paper felt warm, almost greasy. The words had changed. Thank you for returning. You never should have left. Cal dropped it like it had burned him. The pump clicked once. Then again. Then again. Behind him, the bell rang. He turned slowly. The clerk was there again, but different. His face looked younger, less like wax, more like skin stretched too tight, over something that didn't fit right. You done pumping? The man asked. Cal didn't answer. He walked slowly back toward his car, slid in, locked the doors. He started the engine. It coughed once, twice, then caught. He peeled out, gravel spraying behind him, dust kicking up like smoke. He drove for 10 minutes, then 20. But the road didn't change. The trees, the curve in the hill, even the armadillo carcass in the middle of the shoulder, all the same dot, and then the lights. Appeared again. The gas station. Exactly the same. Except this. Time, the sign said, open again. The needle on his gas gauge was back on E-dot. He got out, furious now, heart hammering in his chest. Walked inside, slammed the door behind him. "Listen, you son of a bitch," he started, but the man behind the counter was someone else this time. Younger. A kid, maybe 19, with a face that looked like Cal's own. "Pump one?" The boy asked. Cal's voice caught in his throat. "Yeah, 46 even." He reached for his wallet. It wasn't there. Instead, in his back pocket, was the same crumpled receipt. "See you again yesterday." The room tilted slightly. Cal felt his stomach roll, like the world had turned under his feet. He stumbled out into the lot again, but it wasn't night anymore. It wasn't even Texas. He was somewhere else. A long looping plain of dead grass and heat waves. The station stood alone on a flat gray surface that stretched in all directions. No horizon. The pumps ran without hoses. Fuel spilled out and vanished mid-air. The register was outside now, sitting on a pedestal. He approached it. No one manned it. Just the screen, blinking. Total due. More. Of what? He screamed. "What do you want?" The screen changed. "You." It printed another receipt. He didn't take it. He turned and ran, but every direction led him back to the counter. Time folded there. The sky bent in like wet paper curling in a fire. He saw himself pumping gas again. Over and over. Indifferent. Clothes. Older. Younger. One time he saw himself with no face. Another time he saw himself dead in the driver's seat. Receipt clutched in one hand, eyes wide and cracked like old porcelain. The receipt never stopped printing. Stacks of them now, piled on the counter, fluttering across the lot. Each one read the same: "Thank you for your continued patronage. See you again yesterday. Fuel charged, identity. Amount remaining, less." The fuel gauge in his car now pointed to something that wasn't E or F, just a symbol. A spiraling eye. The next time he tried to speak, the pump answered instead. It told him he'd always been there. Told him the gas was cheap the first time, and he should have known better. Now, every loop costs more. A memory, a name, a face. Eventually, there'd be nothing left to sell, but the pump would keep taking, and the receipt would always print. "See you again yesterday." The television hadn't worked in years, or so the owner claimed. It sat crooked in the far corner of the lounge at the Lone Spur Motel outside of Cula, Texas, a busted zenith wood panel from the late 70s, with two rabbit ears like broken bones sticking toward the cracked ceiling. A layer of dust clung to it thick as cotton, and nobody had tried turning it on in over a decade. Not since the old man who ran the desk swore it made a noise one night, a noise like breathing, and never again let anyone plug it in. Caleb. Avery hadn't heard that story, of course, not until much later. By then, it didn't matter. He pulled into the Lone Spur sometime around 11:40 p.m., headlights cutting across the warped sign and the lone Coke machine that buzzed even louder. Then the moths swarming around it. He'd been on the road since Amarillo, trying to put distance between himself and a job he'd walked out on, a girlfriend he hadn't loved for months, and a feeling that something in him had gone sour without notice. He didn't know what he was looking for, just that he needed a place to stop for the night, to rest, to forget. The motel was the kind of place where the carpet smelled like mildew and regret, and the bedspreads hadn't been washed since Bush Sr. The front desk had no bell, just a note that said, "If I ain't here, Try again. But the old man was there, hunched behind the counter like a vulture waiting on bad news. "Room 9, he said without looking up. "Cash only." Caleb handed over 2 20s and took the key. The plastic fob faded to an unreadable orange. The old man's hands trembled as he passed it over, and his eyes, pale and slick like peeled grapes, lingered just a second too long. "You ain't one of them watchers, are you?" he muttered. "Excuse me?" The man didn't answer, just waved him off. The room was what he expected: stained walls, a rickety AC unit that hiccuped every minute, and a single lamp with a crooked shade. He dropped his duffel, peeled off his boots, and collapsed onto the bed. The silence pressed in from all sides, but it wasn't a comfortable quiet. It was that motel quiet, dead, but twitching, like something still moved beneath the floorboards or inside the walls. Then the TV clicked on. He hadn't touched it. Caleb sat up, blinking at the glow in the corner. The Zenith, dusty and cold, was playing something. Not static, not a channel, either. Just footage. Black and white, grainy, like an old security camera. At first, he thought it was surveillance footage, but the room on the screen was his. Not just the same room, his room. Same bed, same yellowed curtains pulled halfway shut, same duffel bag slouched in the corner. Then he saw himself walk in. On the screen. Now, he watched himself enter the room, drop the bag, sit on the bed. He felt a pulse rise in his throat. This isn't possible, he thought, but it was him. Same shirt, same tired slump of the shoulders. But on the screen something changed. The Caleb on the screen didn't lie back. He stood in the center of the room, arms limp at his sides, head tilted as though listening. The screen flickered and the footage jumped. Now he was screaming. Silent at first. Mouth wide, eyes nearly bursting from their sockets, hands clutching his own face like he was trying to hold it together. Then color bled into the screen, red mostly, and he collapsed. Caleb scrambled to the corner and yanked the power cord from the wall. Sparks jumped. The screen went dark. The room did too. Power out. Even the bathroom light. Then came the hum. It wasn't from the TV anymore. It was inside the walls, like electricity with a heartbeat. The air turned thick, and a sharp cold ran through the seams in the floor like ice cracking underfoot. He turned to the door, grabbed the knob, and felt it burn. Burn. He looked at his hand. Blistered. Palm red and bubbling like meat on a skillet. The hum grew louder. He staggered back, and that's when he noticed the mirror above the dresser had fogged from the inside. Something moved behind it. He didn't wait. He ran for the window, jammed his shoulder into the frame, and pushed it up. It stuck halfway, but he forced it. Slid through, scraped his leg on the frame, hit the ground, and limped toward his car. He didn't look back, but when he climbed into the driver's seat and flicked the key, nothing. Not even a click. And then the lights came back on in the motel room. From the outside, through the half-open curtain, he saw the TV flicker back to life. This time it showed him in the car, right now. He saw himself on the screen, face pale, eyes wide. Behind him in the back seat, a dark shape began to rise. He turned fast. Nothing. Back seat empty. But the hum was there now. Not from the walls. From inside his head. Like a mosquito crawling through the folds of his brain. The car radio flicked. On? He hadn't touched it. White noise. Then a voice. See it? He turned the volume down. The voice stayed the same. Inside. Not through the speaker. I see you, it whispered. I've seen you. Every version. Every loop. And this one ends with the dark. The TV in the window flickered again. On the screen, he saw himself climb out of the car, walk back toward the motel. He didn't want to. God help him, he didn't want to. But he opened the door and stepped into the night. Feet dragging. He watched himself move, frame by frame. And then the motel room door opened, not on screen. In real life, room 9. He stepped inside, because some part of him wasn't his anymore. And sitting on the bed was a different him. Older, hair thinner, face bruised. Staring at the TV. The older Caleb didn't speak. He just pointed. And on the screen now was another version. Younger, cleaner. Walking into the room for the first time, the loop dot, it wasn't just showing them future dot, it was making it. And every loop, something came through the screen a little clearer. The thing behind the mirror, the shape in the back seat, the voice on the radio. It fed on versions, pieces of him from each pass. The hum turned to laughter now. The older Caleb curled up on the bed and started to weep. Outside, the sign buzzed back to life. Welcome back. The TV in the corner kept playing dot, and in the dark behind the glass, something smiled. The pumps hadn't worked in years, but someone kept changing the prices. They said the old Chevron off I-10, just before Sierra Blanca, was closed after a chemical fire in '94. The damage wasn't structural. No black scorch marks, no EPA. Warnings. Just something in the air that never left. Locals called it the sulfur pit. Others avoided it entirely, but travelers still stopped. Especially the tired ones. The ones who missed the sign that said next, gas 89 miles. The ones who swore they'd only be there 5 minutes. Cody Rayner was one of those. He'd been driving since Las Cruces. Eyes red, music low. Truck full of his life in boxes. He didn't know where he was headed, only that it wasn't back there. When the needle hit E, the sign flickered in the dark, a ghost Chevron logo half lit and the words open all night, buzzing like they were trying not to be heard. There were no other cars. No. Other lights for miles. He pulled up to pump 3. The handle clicked in his hand, cold as bone. The screen read begin, but there was no card slot, no keypad. Just that one word. Cody waited, unsure. Then the nozzle jerked on its own, not hard, but enough to make him let go. It slipped into the tank like it knew the way. Then the pump began to count, not dollars. Not gallons. Versions. 1, 2, 3, 4. What the hell? He stepped back. That's when he saw it. The reflection. The pump's glass wasn't showing him. Not really. It showed a version of him, older, covered in soot, hands trembling, eyes black and full of screaming. Cody turned around. No one there, but when he looked again, the reflection changed. Now he was burned badly. Lips gone, skin bubbling like wax. Still staring. The pump kept counting. 16, 17, 18. He yanked the handle. It wouldn't budge. That's when the smell hit him, not gasoline. Sulfur. Burned. Hair, meat. Then the lights over the awning went out. One by one. Boom. Boom. Only. Pump 3 stayed lit. A cone of pale green over his truck. The screen blinked. Inside. Now. The convenience store door creaked open, like something had been listening. He told himself to leave. To run. But his legs didn't listen. His hand turned off the truck, grabbed the keys. Walked. The inside was clean. Too clean. Shelves full. Chips stacked. Soda humming. And behind the counter, himself. Not a twin. Not a trick. Him. Same flannel. Same scrape on the cheek. But the eyes were wrong. Forgot your receipt, the other Cody said. He held it out. A long paper, trailing like a ribbon. Blood soaked. Cody backed up. This isn't real. The other Cody stepped around the counter. Pump 3's special, he said. Takes more than gas. Takes ... choices. Behind him, the drink cooler rattled. Something inside pounded. A face slammed against the fogged glass, his face. Again. Screaming. The paper dragged on the floor. 37, 38, 39. So many Codys, the man said, smiling. And only one can leave. The receipt burst into flame. The lights turned red, and the door behind him vanished. Cody ran. Through aisles that didn't end. Past versions of himself. One hanging by his belt in the beer aisle, another crawling with broken legs near the lottery stand. He screamed for help. The cooler doors all swung open at once. Gasoline poured out. And then the voice came, not over the intercom, inside his head. You pumped your last chance. He woke up outside, in the truck. Dawn creeping up behind the hills. Pump. 3 sat silent. The price read 0. His tank was full, but in the rearview mirror behind him, in the back seat, was the receipt. Still smoking, still growing.